The Zodiac Killer has haunted American crime history for decades. His identity remains unknown, his taunts continue to intrigue and terrify, and his legend refuses to die. In the world of cinema, storytellers have tried to capture the chilling essence of this case, turning unsolved mystery into narrative. Yet one particular project, often spoken of with whispers in the darker corners of film history, became infamous not because of what it revealed, but because of how badly it failed. The Zodiac Killer Project, an attempt to capture the killer through cinema, became a strange blend of ambition, obsession, and collapse. This is not just the story of a murderer. It is also the story of a failed film that promised answers and delivered confusion. The Zodiac Killer terrorized California in the late 1960s and early 1970s. He targeted young couples, lone individuals, and even a taxi driver, striking fear into communities around San Francisco. More than the murders themselves, it was his letters to newspapers, laced with cryptic ciphers and chilling threats, that cemented his legend. The police pursued him, journalists analyzed him, and the public feared him. Yet despite countless investigations, no confirmed identity ever emerged. Hollywood has long been fascinated by such mysteries. The idea of putting the Zodiac Killer on screen seemed inevitable. In 1971, a man named Tom Hansen, a businessman with connections in the world of distribution, announced that he would create a film based on the Zodiac. Unlike later polished Hollywood projects, Hansen's vision was strange, raw, and reckless. His goal was not only to entertain or frighten audiences. According to Hansen himself, his ultimate mission was to catch the Zodiac Killer. He believed that by making a film about the crimes, and then luring the killer to a premiere, he might expose him. This unusual ambition gave birth to what would become known as the Zodiac Killer Project. At first glance, the plan sounded almost cinematic in itself. A filmmaker using the silver screen as bait for a real-life murderer. It was the kind of idea that could have filled headlines if it succeeded. But behind the ambition lay poor planning, rushed execution, and a disregard for both ethics and safety. The production was a disaster from the start. Hansen had no experience in directing feature films, his budget was minimal, and his crew was a patchwork of amateurs. The resulting film was less a professional thriller and more an awkward, exploitative piece of cinema that left audiences confused rather than convinced. The filming process was chaotic. Actors were given little direction, scenes were stitched together with no coherent rhythm, and the script was a bizarre mixture of fact and fiction. The Zodiac Killer's crimes were portrayed with sensational exaggeration, while the character of the killer was turned into a caricature, rather than a chilling enigma. Viewers who later saw the film described it as a disturbing mix of exploitation and clumsy storytelling. Instead of capturing the terror of the real Zodiac, the film cheapened it. Yet the most unusual part of the project was not the film itself, but the strategy surrounding its release. Hansen believed that the real Zodiac might attend the premiere. He set up a contest at the theater, encouraging attendees to fill out cards with their names and thoughts. His idea was to compare handwriting samples from these cards to the notorious Zodiac letters. In his mind, the killer might not resist the temptation of seeing himself portrayed on screen. Hansen thought he was laying a trap. In reality, he was orchestrating a reckless publicity stunt that endangered everyone in the theater. Imagine sitting in that theater in 1971. You are watching a poorly made film about an active serial killer who has taunted police and media with threats of mass violence. You are aware that he has never been caught, and you are filling out a card with your handwriting in the hopes of winning a prize. All the while, you are being told that the actual Zodiac Killer might be sitting in the room with you. The atmosphere was not just unsettling, it was dangerous. Hansen's attempt at catching a murderer was built on fantasy rather than investigative science. Not surprisingly, the stunt failed. The Zodiac never revealed himself, no useful evidence was collected, and the film quickly faded into obscurity. For decades, it was remembered only by cult cinema enthusiasts who appreciated its strangeness as an example of exploitation filmmaking. Hansen's dream of catching a killer through a movie premiere ended not with justice, but with embarrassment. The Zodiac Killer Project became one of the strangest failures in the history of true crime cinema. But the story did not end there. In the years that followed, the film resurfaced occasionally, drawing new attention from historians, true crime enthusiasts, and lovers of bizarre cinema. It became a curiosity, not because of its quality, but because of its intent. The idea that someone believed a low-budget film could trap a serial killer fascinated and horrified in equal measure. For some, it symbolized the reckless hunger for notoriety that often surrounds true crime. For others, it demonstrated how obsession with solving a mystery can cloud judgment entirely. The failure of the Zodiac Killer Project is important for another reason. It shows how dangerous it can be when the line between entertainment and investigation blurs. Hansen may have truly believed in his mission, but his methods put innocent people at risk. If the Zodiac Killer had indeed attended that premiere, if he had been armed or motivated, the results could have been catastrophic. Instead of catching him, the event could have turned into another massacre. The naivety of the plan is shocking when viewed today. It also reflects the cultural climate of the time. The late 1960s and early 1970s were filled with fear, conspiracy theories, and distrust of authority. The Zodiac Killer himself exploited that atmosphere, sending letters that mocked the police and threatened mass violence at schools. In that climate, Hansen's film tapped into public fascination, but it also fed into the sensationalism that surrounded the case. It turned real victims into characters and real terror into spectacle. For the families of the Zodiac's victims, the film was likely not only insulting, but re-traumatizing. Decades later, when Hollywood finally produced a polished film about the Zodiac in 2007, under the direction of David Fincher, the contrast could not have been greater. Fincher's film was meticulous, researched, and respectful of the victims. It portrayed the case not as cheap horror, but as an enduring mystery that consumed investigators and journalists. In comparison, Hansen's project looked like a crude sideshow. The failure of the 1971 film made Fincher's later success even more significant, because it showed how the same subject could be handled responsibly. Today, the Zodiac Killer Project lives on mainly as a cautionary tale. It is screened occasionally at cult cinema festivals, often with audiences laughing at its awkward acting, bizarre script, and sensational premise. But beneath the laughter is something more serious. It is a reminder of how obsession can lead people to reckless decisions. Hansen wanted to catch a killer, but instead he created a piece of cinema history remembered only for its failure. The strange afterlife of the film also reveals something about the public's enduring fascination with the Zodiac. Even decades later, any project linked to the case draws attention. The idea that the killer might still be alive, still watching, still hiding, adds a layer of unease to every retelling. The Zodiac Killer Project may have failed as a trap, but it succeeded in becoming part of the legend. People now discuss it not as a path to justice, but as one more bizarre chapter in the story of America's most mysterious serial killer. There is an irony that cannot be ignored. Hansen wanted his film to expose the Zodiac. Instead, his film exposed his own desperation, his lack of preparation, and the dangerous ways in which ambition can eclipse logic. His attempt to use cinema as an investigative tool failed spectacularly, but it created a story almost as strange as the one he tried to capture. The idea of luring a serial killer into a theater is cinematic in itself, but in reality, it was reckless and ineffective. As we look back on the Zodiac Killer Project, we are left with a mixture of disbelief and unease. Disbelief that anyone thought such a plan could work. Unease that it nearly placed people in danger for the sake of spectacle. Yet we are also left with fascination, because in the world of true crime, failure can sometimes be as compelling as success. The failed film became part of the Zodiac's myth, a reminder that his shadow reached not only into lives and investigations, but also into cinema itself. The story of the Zodiac Killer is one of terror, mystery, and obsession. The story of the Zodiac Killer Project is one of ambition, recklessness, and failure. Together, they form a strange pair, each feeding the legend of the other. One man sought to capture the killer with film, but instead became captured himself by the lure of unsolved mystery. That is why the failed film attempt continues to be remembered, not as a path to justice, but as a strange and haunting chapter in the saga of America's most elusive murderer.